Hello once again, everybody. Next up, we've got Kito Mann with beautiful web apps with Polymer and TypeScript. And we've just added some polls to the the poll section down below. So if you want to interact with that and let us know what the answers are to those questions, that'd be wonderful. So over to you, Kito.
Okay, so hello and welcome. This presentation is called Beautiful Web Apps with Polymer and TypeScript. Thanks for coming, and I hope you all are enjoying this conference. I think it's a really awesome idea. So hopefully we'll get to do this again next year. And I hope you all are enjoying the conference. And as we go along, please let us know what you think of the different sessions and what you think of the conference layout and all that kind of stuff. So, all right. Quickly, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Kito, and there we go. There's the next slide. All right, so I run a consulting company called Virtua, and we do training, architecture, consulting, mentoring around a variety of technologies, including a lot of Java stuff, and also Polymer and web components. And basically, I've been working with Java and software development for longer than I care to admit. And over the years, I've had a podcast, spoken at a lot of conferences, done a lot of different projects related to the Java world. So your first question may be, well, before we get to that, aren't you a Java guy, right? So if you're wondering why a Java guy is talking about web components and TypeScript, the main reason is because they're pretty cool technologies. I'm actually first and foremost a software developer, so over the years, I've worked with a variety of technologies, and actually started my career working with Delphi, which is a desktop client server tool back before the web even existed. Basically, the key aspect of Delphi was its component orientedness, essentially, that you could build these cool widgets to quickly build out your application. And so as my career went on and I got into building web applications, I always sort of wanted that ability to build a UI, build an application out of reusable components. And as a consequence, I spent a lot of time working with Java server faces, which allows you to have reusable UI components in the Java side. So there's like a server component, but then there's also gets rendered HTML and JavaScript. And over time, clients have become much more powerful. When all that stuff started, browsers really weren't really that capable. So basically, when I stumbled across web components, for years I've been working on Java development teams, building web applications, but also doing a lot of the JavaScript stuff, a lot of the stuff with third-party widgets, things like that. So web components really seemed like a good sweet spot for me, because essentially they have the ability to, bring a component model to the web. And it's standard, so it's something that's not just a component model that lives in a particular application framework. So that's kind of how I stumbled into this. And as a consequence of being a Java guy, TypeScript sounded really appealing. So I'll talk a little bit more about what that is and how I think it's useful for writing Polymer applications and web components. So another thing I want to say before I get started is special thanks to Red Pill Now, which is one of my primary clients. A lot of the code I'll be showing I've done with them. So I wanted to thank them for giving me the ability to show off some of the work we've done. Okay, so down at the bottom, you should see a poll. And I'd like you guys to answer it for me. Usually when I'm doing a session in front of a live audience, I say, I ask them about themselves. I ask them, things pertinent to the actual session. So you should see these questions down in the poll at the bottom, which hopefully I can look at if I can get this to work properly. All right, let's see if people are putting stuff in there. All right, so yeah, we got some answers. Okay. All right, so it looks like most people have, they're changing. Oh, that's really cool. Nice real-time results here. Okay, so nobody here has worked with Polymer and TypeScript together, which means you've definitely come to the right session. And most people have worked with Polymer. Okay. And they get sort of a nice split between people who have worked with TypeScript and people who have not. All right, so what I'll do is I'll basically, I won't talk too much about Polymer because most of you guys have worked with it. I will do a quick overview, but that's about it. And I'll still do a quick overview of TypeScript as well. And then we'll talk about sort of the process of using them together. One of my old coworkers is in the chat room. That's cool. Yeah. All right. So the first thing I want to point out is that my goal here is not to talk about pretty applications in terms of the UI being a slick, original, beautiful interface. What I'm talking about is actually architecture. Because I am first and foremost a software engineer architect, the way I think about applications is sort of how they're designed, how they're built, how they look, how you're actually able to maintain it as a team going forward. I also work with large companies and enterprise applications. Those applications are around for a while, so you want to make sure that what you've built is actually something that can be maintained. So I'm talking about beautiful architecture. So over the last year, I've been in several different Polymer and TypeScript projects. I've been working with Polymer for about a couple years, but in the last year or so, I've tried to do almost exclusively Polymer and TypeScript as much as possible. And these applications have been either smaller internet business applications, or for one of the projects which we are converting to TypeScript is a larger sort of product application, but still the target is going to be, businesses, organizations. And I also had the joy of working on an IoT application as well. And that was really cool because that was my first IoT project. So our front end was basically controlling a device, which I'm not really able to discuss, but it was controlling a device and controlling different parts of it. And, it was kind of cool to see the ability, you change, you press a button on the web app and it actually affects a moving part in, this device, which could be who knows where. So that was a pretty cool project. So I'll be showing bits of code from some of these different applications that I've worked on over the last year. Okay, and of course I'll be talking about different lessons that I've learned. So for those of you who have not worked with TypeScript, just wanted to give you a quick overview about what it is. If you saw Danny's session, he was using TypeScript, so you've already seen some of it there. But basically, here's the quick answer you can get from the TypeScript site. It's JavaScript that scales. So basically, it's a typed superset of JavaScript that compiles to plain JavaScript. Works in any browser, any host, any OS, and is open source. And this is actually a pretty well-written description because it's very concise. There's a few key terms here. Number one is typed, right? So TypeScript has static typing and compiles to plain JavaScript, which means that it can run on any browser that supports JavaScript. So in terms of typing, TypeScript has the ability to basically compile your code or transpile, depending on what terminology you're using, from the TypeScript syntax into pure JavaScript. It can do all the way back to ES3, although I hope no one actually does that. You actually lose some features the further back you go. But basically, by providing a type system on top of JavaScript, you basically can, number one, catch errors at runtime, have to use the types if you don't want to. You also get refactoring support as well. And it really helps a lot with the tooling as well, as you saw with what Danny was just doing. The other key thing is that TypeScript really includes a superset of ECMAScript 2015 or ES 2015 or ES6. So basically, you are using ES 2015 with some added type checking and some added and the other thing is that it's very good about including features which are future parts of JavaScript. The other thing is it's from Microsoft. So to me, TypeScript is a really good example. TypeScript and VS Code are good examples of sort of the new Microsoft, which is not tied only to Windows. Of course, Microsoft has a very good support for TypeScript in their own tooling and their own ecosystem, but it's an open source project which anybody can use. All right, so let's take a quick look at what TypeScript looks like. And this is probably the best place to go if you want to play with TypeScript. And let me clear this out here. This is the TypeScript Playground, which is available on the TypeScript website. So let me get my notes out here. So let's say what I want to do is first, I can just write a simple function, right? I can write normal JavaScript, nothing special here. All right. And you see on the right, it looks exactly the same. So I can write JavaScript, it works, it compiles, nothing exciting. But with TypeScript, we get interfaces, okay? So you can have interfaces and abstract classes. You have a full sort of object-oriented perspective that you can create, okay? So let's say I want to create an animal. And let's say I also want to go a little bit further and I want to create a animal implementation. And I'll call that a base animal, okay? So there's a couple things to notice here. First, that now the code here is looking a little bit different in terms of what's being generated on the right here. And also, you'll see that I'm using some nice features. So we're saying essentially here that if you want to move, you don't have to put any value here, but the default value is going to be 0. So basically, we have an optional parameter with a default value, which is nice. We're also using template literals, which are nice ES 2015 features where you can just throw in the actual variable that you're referencing inside of the string there. So we've got that. And of course, if I did something like this, equals, that's not going to work, right? Because base animal is a abstract class, right? So an abstract class cannot be instantiated. So if I want to actually use this, I've got to create a subclass of it. So let's say I create a simple class. So now I could do like, let all right, and then I could do person.move. Right, so now I can actually get a result. And undefined moved 0. Okay, what it's saying that because basically there's no name defined, right? So I can make that a little more interesting. So there is a name defined in the interface, but let's say I want to actually just create a getter, so I can use the get syntax. Okay, and let's say I want to have a couple properties. Okay, so now if I do this, we'll have this basically the same result because I don't have these values defined. So I can declare a constructor. Okay. Be a little lazy here. All right, so you notice also here I have this notion of actual private members, okay? And usually what I like to do is I still like to use the underscore syntax, which is a very common way of referencing a private variable or private property, but I also like to make it private as well. And what this means is that if I did create a person here, let's say I did say, let me create myself here, about 6 feet tall, and all right. So then let's say I did I tried to do me.height. I get a compile time error, right? Because height is now a private variable. So I can't actually reference it at all, okay? Now, the only drawback is that there's no protected member, so this is kind of a pain for testing. If you want to access private variables during testing, you end up having to make them like public, which is kind of a pain. But other than that, it's pretty cool. So let's say I wanted to add another function here called say hello. All right. All right. Now what I can do is basically I have this function, and one of the things I love is two things here. Number one is this ability here to say this is an optional parameter. Okay. So in JavaScript you can pass in an arbitrary number of parameters, but in TypeScript you can't unless you explicitly say it's possible. So for example, here if I say 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's say, of course, in TypeScript, it'll actually complain because these aren't defined, okay? Let's say I just want to throw in some more parameters here. Okay. So it's complaining because I'm passing in more parameters than I specified, okay? And this keeps you from having situations where, you change the signature or maybe someone cut and pasted something and they're passing in stuff that they think is working and it's not actually doing anything. So let's say I want to say hello to somebody, okay? All right. So now I see what my name is. I say I moved 0 because that was the default value. And then I also say, hello remote webconf. Okay. So that's sort of a quick idea here. And of course, I can create different people. And also I can do things like this. So let's say I had a function foo. Let's say test. Let's say move animal. Okay. All right. Oops. I write so much Java still that I still get confused here. I will often put the wrong thing in there. All right, the wrong syntax. All right, so let's say I want to move an animal. And then I can animal.move. Okay. So let's say they move animal. Now, because the animal is interface I have up here, I can still pass this in and then call move, right? So let's try that. All right, so I moved 25 meters, okay? But if I try to do this, let's say pass in, anything other than an animal, like a foo or something, it won't work. I'll get an error, okay? So that's the basic idea with TypeScript. It's just that you have the ability to use all the ES 2015 features, but also to have strong typing as well. And it also does a pretty good type inference. So for example, let's say I said let animal equal me, okay? So this works because TypeScript is smart enough to say, okay, well, I know that me is a person. I know person implements the animal interface. And I know when you assign it to me, to some animal, that it is therefore going to be a person and also an animal. So this works as well, which is nice. Another sort of handy feature is what they call union types and type guards. So let's say I wanted to find my own special type. Okay. So up here, I'll say, well, I also want this special type. called a string on array. So this is basically a union type, which means anything which is string or string array will essentially have the ability to, basically it says you can pass in one or the other, okay? So then I can change my say hello sentence here, or say hello method here, I should say. Okay. All right, so basically what I'm done here is said, okay, well, what you can pass in is going to be a string or a string array, okay? So all this code works fine, but I could also pass in this. Okay? And either one is going to work. Okay, so now it's iterating through that list because we passed in the array type. But if I passed in, some other type, I would get an exception as well. There are also things you can do. You can basically decide how strict you want to be. You can say, you don't want to allow implicit any, and any is basically the way TypeScript says that it doesn't care about the type. It's also a very helpful escape hatch if you don't have any type definitions or any way to know about the code you're working with. But if you want to not allow it, you could say, well, you can't declare something and not that's any and not say anything about it. So in this case, I could say, at foo, right? All right, and yeah, let me say foo.bar. So that's not going to pick it up. Well, anyways, the idea is that if you have situations where you are implicitly expecting something to be any and it can't figure out the type, it won't allow it. You can also check for null checks and things like that. So there's a lot of really cool features in there. So this is my quick overview. Just scratched the surface, but you should definitely check it out, and you'll see some more examples as we go forward. All right. Let me just change my screens here. Okay, so this is all nice. We have this idea of type definitions, etc. But sorry, I'm looking at the comments there. Got distracted. All right, so what about existing JavaScript libraries? Let's say that this is all nice and you can add typing to your own stuff, but if you want to work with any third-party library, you kind of need to be able to add typing to it as well if you want to really get the most out of working with TypeScript. So basically, there is what we call a type definition for that. So that is basically a file that defines all the types in a given library. And basically, there is this GitHub repo called definitely typed, which has thousands of libraries to pick from. Okay, so and this is probably the only repo where I've seen that you can't actually add any more. It won't actually display all the entries in the list. Now you don't usually go here to get them. You can get them either via npm or through different tools called typings or TSD, which I'll talk about in a minute. But essentially, they're here. So a good example that I like to show, just because everyone's used it at some point in their life, is jQuery, right? So these are the type definitions for jQuery. Now I'll make this a little bigger. Oh, it doesn't. Yeah, it does get bigger. Okay, good. All right. So basically, there's a jQuery Ajax interface, and basically it's just mentioning all the different functions, okay, and then saying what their types are. Boolean. Some things are still going to be any, which means we don't really know what type it is. It can be anything you want, okay. But basically, we get by adding this to your project, you get the ability to call jQuery, and you get real objects that you can work with. And also in your editor, you'll get code completion to help you figure out what the properties are when you're working with it. So pretty much every library out there has some sort of support for TypeScript. And also the same goes for editors. Pretty much every editor has at least a plugin for TypeScript. So pretty much if you want to use TypeScript, just look for an editor or look for the plugin for the editor of your choice or the IDE of your choice, and you should be good to go. And the other thing I like about TypeScript, and this is important when you have to actually work with other developers and management and convince them to use something. So it's an easy sell, and the reason it's an easy sell is really just a few different keywords. Microsoft, which means it's probably not going to be dropped by because the developer got a new job or he got hit by a bus or something. Angular, same reason, right? We all know that Angular 2 uses TypeScript. So that's a really big selling point in of itself. And Angular has actually influenced the way TypeScript has developed over time. Superset of JavaScript. This is probably one of the #1 selling points for me. And that is basically that if you have a JavaScript developer, it's not really particularly hard for them to use TypeScript. Now, some of the concepts are a little harder for people to grasp depending on their background. So, for example, if you've never really done a lot of object-oriented programming, it's going to be a little harder for you to start writing, cool classes and class hierarchies and things like that. But in terms of being able to hit the ground running, just the fact that it's a superset of JavaScript makes it really, really easy. And kind of the key thing for me is developer productivity, right? I actually get code completion. I don't have to look up every single method I'm accessing, right, on the web. And also it helps in terms of, reducing errors and basically making developers a little bit happier, which is always a good thing. All right, so that was my quick TypeScript overview. So most of you guys are familiar with Polymer to some degree, so I'm just going to do this very quickly. Let's see, yes, only 6 of you have not worked with Polymer. Okay, sorry guys. All right, so, excuse me. So the Polymer project really, this is from their website, but there's a couple different things. There's the library itself, which helps you really build new web components, and basically it's syntactic sugar on top of the web components API. But what I like about it is that it sort of insulates you, and this was important in the early days of the specifications. So especially before all the V1 specs came out for custom elements. In Shadow DOM, it really helped to have some syntactic sugar to work on, so that as things changed beneath you, as the standards changed, you didn't have to change your code completely. So what's been really great is that even though browsers have been slowly starting to ship implementations of a lot of these features, all of our code works the same. Now, when we switch to Polymer 2, there'll be upgrade. There's an upgrade process, but it's not that drastic, and that's because of the sugar that Polymer provides. Polymer also provides an app toolbox, which is a set of Polymer components that you can use for building applications. It also has a suite of really nice UI components to use as well, and some other components as well. But primarily, when I talk about Polymer, I'm mostly talking about using the library itself, and then using the bits and pieces of the ecosystem, whether they're from Google or other third parties, to build your applications. Talk about most of this stuff. Probably the #1 additional feature from my perspective that Polymer provides is the two-way data binding. So in addition to having some syntactic sugar to make your life easier in terms of writing a web component, you actually can have data binding, which really goes a lot of way to creating full-fledged applications. Okay, and whether or not two-way is good or bad, that's an ongoing question. I can totally understand the idea of doing properties in and events up. I think two-way data binding works well in smaller applications, but as things go larger, as your application gets larger, you probably do need to think more about the way our data flows. But regardless, Polymer does give you the ability to do data binding in general, which is nice. Also has a lot of great other features as well. There's also the Polymer Elements catalog, which basically has tons of different components, some for Google, some for paper elements, for UI components and things like that. which is a really great place if you're building Polymer apps. It has lots of tools, has a command line interface, build tools, testing tools, et cetera, et cetera. And a few other key things. Polymer is developed by and used internally by Google. And this is probably another really big selling point for it. Google is one of the key proponents of web components. And Polymer is really their way to make them usable all the time. So as the specs were changing, you could still build web components. As they solidify, you'll still be able to build web components. And as time goes on, a lot of the features, if not all of them, of Polymer may actually disappear. But in the meantime, Polymer is a good way to sort of insulate you from the changes to the specs over time. But another key thing is that Google actually uses it a lot themselves. So it's used in over 500 Google projects. There's over 1 billion users, 4,000 custom web components. This is all in Google. And there's, these are actually real applications: Chrome, Play, Fi, YouTube Gaming, Translate. There's others. I heard they're actually doing the main YouTube site. Perhaps someone else can confirm, but there's lots of stuff out there. So they're actually using this in production in real time on very high volume sites. And lots of web pages as well. Another thing is that Polymer benefits from the Google marketing arm. So you've got Polymer Summit every year, Polycast by the venerable Rod Donson, who's actually, I think, at this conference somewhere. So lots of stuff is out there. So I'm going to do a very quick demo of a Polymer component, just so you can see what they look like, for those of you who aren't too familiar with the way they look. And I'm going to do it using this product called Red Pill Dig. And Dig is a key product of Red Pill now. And essentially what Dig does is something which people don't think about very much, but it basically provides access to Lotus Notes applications. So I'm sure a lot of you have not really heard about, hey, someone just said YouTube is definitely going Polymer, which is kind of what I thought. Good. So a lot of organizations have hundreds and hundreds of old IBM Lotus Notes applications lying around. Red Pill Dig actually has the ability to sort of look at them all and get all the data out of them and give you a visual representation of all the data. So it's one of the projects I'm working on, and this one is not in TypeScript yet, so it's just pure JavaScript. But what I'm going to do is do many windows here. And all right, so my server is running. All right, let me see if I can go back to Chrome here. Sorry, I've gotten away from all the windows. All right, here we go. All right, so this is Dig. I'm not going to go into the application. It's a Polymer app, and it lets you, on the left-hand side are all these different notes applications which you can access and poke around and see all the data for, et cetera, et cetera. This client is actually, as you can see, the Salvation Army. But what I did want to look at is just one very simple thing. So if I am here and I look for search results, let's see, for tree. Is there a result for tree? All right, so there's tree. Okay, so this all the stuff in the middle here, this is actually a particular component. What I love about web components is the ability to actually inspect stuff. And we'll ignore any console errors there. This is still under development. All right, so this section in here, if we go up, there's a neon animal, which is a Polymer element for an animated element or page usually. And then up here, though, there's this dig home here. So what I'm looking at is this dig home class. So if I were to look at this, so actually, it is an element in the DOM, but of course it's a web component and it's written in Polymer. So if I look at it, it looks like this. Okay. And let me see if I can make this bigger here. Let's see. There we go. Okay. It looks like there we go. Okay. All right. So a few key things here. With the Polymer element, you have this. Usually, you have two basic things. First of all, you're using using HTML imports, which is probably the least popular spec from the web components set. And basically, they're really cool. They're a way to basically define dependencies. So all of these files will be loaded, but they won't be loaded more than once. And they're basically going to have more HTML and JavaScript that this component needs. Inside here is the DOM module. So this basically is what encapsulates my component. And there's two elements. One is template, which of course uses the template tag, which is one of the most important parts of the web component specs. There's some CSS. There's these are custom CSS custom properties here, if you're handy. And this is the actual element. There's nothing too exciting here except for the fact that this, since this is an actual page, it's basically going to consist of several other elements. So neon animated pages let you switch between different pages. And each one of these neon animatable elements is another page. Okay. And then inside of each one of these, on the first page, these are the actual search results, and that has another component in it called dig search results. There's that doc preview, which was on the right-hand side. I'm sorry, it seems hard for me to switch back between the different views in this here. But if I just want to run back here. So this is the search results on the left here, and this was that doc preview component on the right here. And then most of the sugar, though, in terms of Polymer is really in the actual code. So basically, you define a Polymer element this way. You call the Polymer class or Polymer constructor, and you say the name of the actual tag, and then you can give it properties. And properties can have several different things. They can have a type. They can notify, so you get the ability to basically automatically send change events whenever those things occur, and your application can listen for those, or other components can listen for those, or be notified of those property changes. And you also have things like computed functions. So this is basically, or computed properties, excuse me. This is basically saying, all right, for this property, really, this is how I want it to be defined. So whenever you access this property, call this method and then pass in these values. So basically, whenever these values change, this property is going to change. And these are other properties. So this is search results and hover doc ID. These are other properties of this component. So whenever they change, the value of this hide preview of property is going to change as well. Polymer also supports behaviors, which are essentially mix-ins. So we have a behavior for animation. So this is being mixed in this class. And there's some helper methods, like methods for listening to events, just a little bit of syntactic sugar, nothing too exciting. And then you see there's not much going on in this class, but it should give you an idea of basically the Polymer syntax. Okay, so once you've defined your properties, you basically can just define your methods and then go from there. Okay, so that's the quick overview of a simple normal Polymer app. All right, let's go back to slides. All right, so if you want to integrate Polymer and TypeScript, the first thing you might feel is this sort of, oh no, look, because there's really no native integration. Polymer doesn't ship out of the box with TypeScript integration. But of course, there is a GitHub repo. There is a GitHub project for this. Okay. And with the one I've been using is called Polymer TS. And this is probably the first really stable one that came out of the gate. And basically, it just gives you decorators for most Polymer features and inheritance. That's pretty much what it gives you, which is really all you need in order to get moving. All right, so here's another app I'll show. This is another Salvation Army application. And the first thing I'll do is kill this. All right, just hold on one second. I lost my notes here. Okay. So we'll go to the Officer Furlough app and we'll run this one. All right, so let's switch over to okay. All right, it's better. All right. We did not design this page. Login page was not designed by us. All right, so this is another little app, and it's just a simple application for managing requests for leave or furloughs. But what I wanted to show was something very simple here. So this little component down here. So if I wanted to take a look at this one, okay. All right, so this is the FURL history banner component. Okay, so let's take a look at that. All right, so this is the TypeScript version. And essentially what you have here is the same sort of setup. Let me make this bigger actually. All right. You have the same sort of setup. I'm having trouble managing these two monitors and the way things are working in this particular environment. All right. Just go back to Officer Furlough here. Okay. All right, there we go. So this is pretty much the same. You know, it's got a DOM module. It's got some CSS. This is using the CSS property features that Polymer provides, or helps you use, I should say. It doesn't actually provide them out of the box by itself, but essentially, I'm able to essentially take parameters that are sent into this component, and also I can globally define different variables. So here I'm basically this is actually layout stuff for Flex Layout, which is one of the components. But also you can use these features to apply different CSS variables to your application. So example here, we're essentially using a variable that is a particular color that's defined in a completely different theme file. So whenever we change it in one place, it changes everywhere that uses this variable. But the code here is pretty simple. It's just a div. And it has a couple things here. It has a binding here to a property on the component itself. That's also what's happening here. This $ here is a special Polymer syntax that basically lets you bind an attribute of an existing HTML element, which is what's going on here. But the difference thing here is this, the file is actually being included down here, right? And there are some tools that allow you to do inline TypeScript, but out of the box, Polymer TS doesn't, and I haven't really looked into the other tools to do it. So some of the tools that ship with some of the Polymer tooling doesn't actually work well this way. So with TypeScript. So you notice the include here actually is including a JS file. It's not including a TS file, right? And the reason is because TypeScript transpiles to JavaScript, right? So the actual HTML file needs to actually include a JavaScript file, not a TS file. However, our code is in TS, okay? So this is the TypeScript version, and you notice it's a little bit different. The first thing that you'll see, and I'll talk about the namespace stuff in a minute, the first thing you'll see is that we're actually using a decorator. So this is a TypeScript decorator to say that it's a component. And for our properties, we're using decorators as well. So instead of using the properties sort of array to reference to, or not necessarily array, but instead of having a properties bag, we're basically in this situation having an annotation or decorator that we can add properties or specify things for. So I can still say like type, what's another one? Value, etc. You can still do all those different things. But you notice I'm getting actual code completion, right? These are the different things I can pick. And this is because we're using TypeScript. Okay. So these are all computed properties. Okay. And what that means is that it's a property, but when you reference it, it will essentially, as you saw before, call this method, and that method will basically, whenever these values change, this property will change as well. But in TypeScript, you can use the annotation. So you see a lot of my stuff here. These are all different computed properties. And then down here, we have just a couple of normal methods, but we can use private as well. Okay. So this is an example of a pretty simple component. Okay, but there's another couple things to notice here. Since we're using TypeScript, we're actually subclassing a base class. Okay, we actually have types. So for each request in this application, there's actually a THQ request type, which is defined here, and this is essentially a representation of the JSON object that I'm working with. But instead of just having a lot of properties that I can't really inspect at development time, if I specify them up front in an actual object, then I get code completion, and it won't allow me to reference methods on there which don't exist. So for example, if I go back to this history banner, okay, if in some method, I try to do, this.request.foobar, I should get a compiler error. It may not really be complaining, but unreachable code. All right. There we go. Should be complaining. It's probably being a little slow right now. But that's another thing that's nice here. Another nice thing is TypeScript has enums as well. So this is an actual enumerated type. So that's defined here, which is pretty handy as well. So, all right, so that's a quick look at what a TypeScript component looks like. So, and that's specifically how things look in the world of Polymer TS. So there can be other implementations that integrate Polymer and TypeScript, and they can take a completely different approach. They can give you different decorators and give you sort of a different model to represent all the same Polymer concepts. There's a couple that are out there. There's Polymer TS decorators and typed web components. The latter is very new. I think it's only a couple months old. The first one I haven't really looked at very closely. So there are other options as well, but I believe that Polymer TS is the most popular. Another thing to keep your eye on is Polymer 2. Polymer 2 is coming out pretty soon, this quarter apparently. And Polymer 2, basically, there is a branch for TypeScript. It's a little bit out of date, but it's clear that there's work on bringing full TypeScript support to Polymer. I don't think there's been any definitive schedule announced, and it's not completely clear exactly what it's going to look like, but it's out there. If anyone has any more details, please add them to the chat. Okay, so looks like we're running out of time here. All right, can someone just tell me exactly what time the session ends? Just am I really 5 minutes over now? Is there a request to the venerable organizers there? Okay, all right, that's a great answer.
Hi, Kito.
Oh, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just sent you a message. Yeah, it was due to end 5 minutes ago, but we can use some time in the break. So
All right, so I'll wrap up. I was just looking at the clock. I'm like, okay, yeah, is it really? Wasn't sure if that was before we started or not. The timer there. Okay, thank you. All right, so just a couple. I'll wrap this up, but I do want to mention a few things here. First of all, what I found great about TypeScript and Polymer together is really a lot of the things we've talked about is just the ability, number one, to get that sugar Polymer provides, and also TypeScript provides. So you're basically getting a lot of syntactic sugar to make your life easier. You're getting the type checking, which is wonderful. And also, as your application gets more complicated, the ability to sort of integrate everything becomes a lot easier. It's really, I think, made our applications a lot more robust. In terms of challenges, there were some issues getting the project structure right. The Polymer starter kit doesn't actually support TypeScript out of the box. In the earlier versions, the only option was to take the Babel recipe, because Babel is another transpiler. So, and then modify that using gulp and gulp TypeScript. And then also the 2.0 Polymer starter kit, which is based on the Polymer CLI, not CI. It's nice, but it's pretty limited, and I really prefer actually having some flexibility with gulp. And also, there's no built-in TypeScript integration as well. There is the ability to add custom builds to it. So I haven't seen a public TypeScript version, but hopefully someone will do that at some point in the future. So that took a little bit of work. There's starter kits on GitHub, which you can look at if you're interested in that. Type definitions is another thing which can be sort of a pain. So basically, TypeScript needs to actually have reference to all the types that you're referencing for whatever it's compiling. So that can be a little bit of a job to work with. Eventually, what we settled on was using the typings type manager. There's a couple different ones. TSD was the first one. Typings was the second one. They're talking about in TypeScript 2 actually doing everything a little bit differently. But for us, typing seems to have worked out relatively well. Another issue we ran into was Polymer type definitions were kind of a pain, pretty hard to find. And remember, the benefit of a type definition is that when you're referencing the objects in that library, you actually get some type safety and some code completion and all that kind of stuff. Not so much luck with the Polymer type definitions. There are different versions of them. Nothing official from the Polymer team. The ones indefinitely typed didn't really work right for us, so we kind of just didn't really worry about them too much. At the end of the day, we got most of our gains from just having TypeScript within our own objects. We don't really use a lot of third-party libraries anyways. So, okay. Just one last thing here is that for modules, Polymer likes HTML imports, but some libraries will ship with a version for a particular module system or a version that uses some sort of module, and so that can be a bit of an issue. And basically, what you end up doing is just trying to get a version of the type definitions that do not require a module system, unless you decide to bring that into your project. And we've pretty much just stuck with HTML imports to keep things simple. TypeScript has this notion of namespaces, which aren't really modules, but they work well for us inside of our own bubble. If we were trying to expose things outside of an organization, we might consider using a real module system. Okay, I mentioned TypeScript 2 handles things differently. For Polymer, there's always issues you run into when it comes into structuring applications. I'm not going to go into all these things, but hopefully they're all familiar to you. Do I use an app component? Where do I put my utility code? How do I do error handling? How do I do authentication, authorization? And pretty much what we ended up with was basically saying we like having an app component, an app level component to work with. Utility code, I actually use just utility classes in JavaScript. I don't really see a need for using behaviors all the time for utilities, but some people do. For error handling and authentication authorization, it turns out that I found the best way to handle that really is via actual components. So just writing a component for error handling, a component for authorization, et cetera, et cetera. And managing the user object turns out to be best from our perspective if you just basically fire an event whenever you've loaded the user object and then let the components that need it get that user object. All right, and another thing I want to mention is when you're reusing stuff across an application, what we ended up really doing, so we have several different applications at Red Pill that use a lot of the same components. What we've done basically is instead of having like a base class or anything like that, what we have very simple base classes that we actually use, but basically we have a core library, and then we have an app layout template similar to what they have for Polymer. And the app layout template basically gives you all the goodness of the look and feel of the app, the layout, etc., all the sort of built-in functionality, but it's just one component that you can use. So that's what seemed to be the best choice for us. Okay, so that was my quick wrap up. This is my first time doing this session, so I'll have to tweak the timing on it, but I appreciate your patience. I think we're technically in the break, but I don't know if you guys want to ask questions or not. I don't know what the deal is, but thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much, Kito. Unfortunately, we are out of time for questions, but we do have a question asked by the audience, but if we can kindly ask you to answer that after the session, send us the answers and we can get them on there so that the audience can still see the answers. We are going into a break now, so we'll be back in roughly 20-30 minutes time into the second half of the day. Thank you very much again, Kito. Lots of great content in there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.